Listen up! I captured a NATO operative because my border patrol found him 3 kilometers inside Burkina Faso territory at 4:37 a.m. No identification, no explanation for being in restricted military zone. He claimed he was lost tourist at 4:37 a.m. in military zone, 3 kilometers from nearest road. Lost tourist. My patrol commander didn't believe him, detained him, everything a lost tourist would carry, everything designed to support his cover story. But my commander noticed something. The way the operative walked. Slight limp, favoring his left leg. Not injury limp. Weight distribution limp. Like something heavy in his left boot. Remove your boots, my commander ordered. The operative hesitated, just fraction of second, but enough to justify force. My soldiers removed his boots. Right boot, normal, left boot, heavier, significantly heavier, something hidden inside the sole. They cut open the boot, found a device, small, sophisticated, electronic, embedded in custom-made hollow sole, device designed to be undetectable, device that would have passed through most security checks, device that changed everything. My commander called me immediately. 5:14 a.m. Mr. President, we have a situation. Foreign operative captured in military zone, device found hidden in his boot. You need to see this. I arrived at the detention facility within 40 minutes. 5:54 a.m. The operative sat in interrogation room. Calm. Intelligence operative calm. The device sat on the table. I studied it. Small. Maybe 8 centimeters long. 4 centimeters wide. 2 centimeters thick. Covered in circuits. Antenna visible. Battery compartment. Memory storage. This wasn't communication device, this was something else. What is this? I asked the operative. He said nothing. Professional silence, trained resistance, standard intelligence protocol. Where are you from? Silence. Who sent you? Silence. What were you doing in our military zone? Silence. I turned to my intelligence chief. Get our technical team. I want to know what this device does. I want to know who made it. I want to know everything. 3 hours of technical analysis, my team working carefully, documenting everything, photographing every component, recording every detail, building evidence. 8:47 a.m. My chief technician called, voice shaking. Mr. President, you need to see this. This device. It's not what we thought. It's worse. I returned to the technical laboratory. My team gathered around computer screens, displaying data extracted from the device. Data that made my blood run cold. This is a mapping device, my technician explained. Advanced GPS, military grade. But it's not just recording locations, it's creating detailed electromagnetic signatures, mapping our military installations, recording our radar frequencies, documenting our communication protocols. Everything. I stared at the screen. Detailed maps of Burkina Faso military bases, precise locations of radar installations, frequencies of our communication systems, patrol routes, security protocols, everything an enemy would need to plan an attack. How long was he collecting this data? Based on timestamps, at least 3 weeks. He's been moving across Burkina Faso systematically, mapping everything, recording everything, building complete intelligence picture of our military capabilities. Can we trace where this data was being transmitted? Yes, satellite uplinks, encrypted. But we can identify the receiving stations, NATO facilities, Brussels, Norfolk, Virginia, multiple locations. This wasn't rogue operation. This was coordinated intelligence gathering by NATO. That's when I realized. This wasn't isolated incident. This was systematic espionage. NATO was mapping Burkina Faso's military infrastructure, preparing for something, planning for something, building intelligence foundation for something. I called emergency national security meeting. 10 a.m., Presidential Palace. My defense minister, intelligence chief, foreign minister, military commanders, everyone who needed to understand the threat. I showed them the device, showed them the data, showed them the maps NATO had been building, showed them 3 weeks of systematic espionage. NATO has been conducting intelligence operations on our territory for at least 3 weeks, possibly longer, mapping our military installations, recording our capabilities, building attack plans. This operative is proof. My defense minister was furious. This is act of war. Foreign military conducting espionage operations on our soil, mapping our defenses, preparing for potential attack. We should expose them, I interrupted, publicly, completely, show the world what NATO is doing, show the device, show the data, show the maps, destroy their credibility. My foreign minister objected. Mr. President, NATO will deny everything, will claim the operative was acting independently, will say the device is fabricated, will accuse us of manufacturing crisis. Then we make denial impossible. We don't just show the device, we show the data it collected. We prove it was transmitting to NATO facilities. We demonstrate systematic espionage operation. We make denial impossible. My intelligence chief supported. We can also check if there are other operatives. If this one was mapping for 3 weeks, there might be others. We should sweep all military zones. Check for similar operations. Do it, immediately. I want every military installation checked, every restricted zone swept, every suspicious person investigated. Find them all. I made another decision. And schedule international press conference tomorrow, 2 p.m. I'm going to expose NATO's espionage operation, show the device, present the evidence, prove systematic intelligence gathering. October 15th, 2 p.m. Press conference, Presidential Palace, international media packed into conference hall. I walked to podium. Behind me, large screens ready to display evidence. The device sitting on table visible to all cameras. Physical proof, tangible evidence, undeniable reality. Yesterday morning, Burkina Faso Border Patrol captured foreign operative in restricted military zone. He claimed to be lost tourist. Investigation revealed he was intelligence operative conducting systematic espionage. Let me show you what we found. I held up the device. Cameras zoomed in, journalists leaning forward, everyone trying to see details. This device was hidden in the operative's boot. Custom-made hollow sole, designed to evade detection. Military-grade GPS. Electromagnetic mapping capability. Satellite transmission system. This is not tourist equipment, this is intelligence gathering tool. I displayed the data on screens. Maps of military installations, radar frequencies, communication protocols, everything the device had collected. For 3 weeks, this operative moved across Burkina Faso, mapping our military infrastructure, recording our capabilities, building intelligence picture, not for academic research, not for commercial purposes, for military planning. The device transmitted data to NATO facilities. We traced the satellite uplinks, Brussels, Norfolk, Virginia, multiple NATO command centers. This wasn't rogue operation. This was coordinated NATO espionage. The room erupted, questions shouted, cameras flashing, everyone recognizing the implications. NATO conducting intelligence operations on sovereign African nation. NATO mapping military installations. NATO preparing for potential military action. Mr. President, what does NATO say about this? NATO hasn't said anything yet. They don't know we caught their operative. They don't know we found the device. They don't know we extracted the data. They're about to find out. Will you release the operative? No. He's facing espionage charges. He conducted intelligence operations on our territory. He violated our sovereignty. He faces trial. What about NATO response? NATO will deny. Will claim the operative acted independently. Will say the device is fabricated. Will accuse us of manufacturing crisis. But we have evidence. We have the device. We have the data. We have satellite transmission records. We have proof. I displayed more evidence. Technical analysis of the device, manufacturing signatures, component origins, everything proving it was NATO equipment, everything proving it was official operation. This device contains components manufactured by defense contractors who work exclusively for NATO. The encryption protocols match NATO standards. The satellite frequencies are NATO military bands. This is NATO equipment, used in NATO operation, on our territory, without our permission. African journalists stood, applauding. Understanding this was bigger than one operative. Understanding this proved NATO conducts intelligence operations across Africa. Understanding this exposed systematic espionage. Western correspondents typed frantically. Understanding this was major scandal. Understanding NATO credibility was threatened. Understanding this complicated Western African relations. Within 2 hours, NATO issued statement. Predictable, defensive, denying everything. NATO has no knowledge of the individual detained in Burkina Faso. NATO does not conduct unauthorized intelligence operations on the territory of sovereign nations. We are investigating these allegations and will provide further information as it becomes available. I responded immediately. Another statement. More evidence. Destroying their denial. NATO claims no knowledge of the operative, but the device he carried transmits to NATO facilities. NATO claims they don't conduct unauthorized operations. But we have 3 weeks of data transmission to NATO command centers. NATO claims they're investigating, but the evidence is undeniable. I released the satellite transmission logs, showing exact times data was sent, showing exact NATO facilities that received data, showing systematic intelligence operation coordinated from Brussels. NATO's denial collapsed within 6 hours. Too much evidence, too many transmission records, too clear connection between operative and NATO facilities. Revised NATO statement, 8 p.m., attempting damage control. NATO acknowledges that an individual associated with NATO intelligence services may have been operating in Burkina Faso. However, this was not an authorized operation. We are conducting internal investigation to determine how this occurred and will take appropriate action. From no knowledge to not authorized, in 6 hours. From complete denial to admission of NATO connection. From claiming fabrication to promising investigation. But I wasn't done. I had more evidence, more operatives, more devices. My intelligence sweep of military zones found 3 more operatives, different nationalities, same equipment, same mission, same NATO connection, all conducting systematic mapping of Burkina Faso military infrastructure. October 16th, another press conference, more evidence, more operatives, more devices. Yesterday, I exposed 1 NATO operative conducting espionage in Burkina Faso. Today, I'm exposing 3 more, 4 total, 4 intelligence operatives, 4 mapping devices, 4 systematic espionage operations, all coordinated, all NATO connected, all unauthorized. I displayed all 4 devices, all 4 operatives' photos, all 4 sets of data, comprehensive intelligence operation, systematic espionage campaign, coordinated NATO operation. NATO claimed the first operative was unauthorized. How do they explain 4 operatives? How do they explain coordinated operations? How do they explain systematic intelligence gathering across multiple locations? This isn't rogue operation. This isn't unauthorized activity. This is systematic NATO espionage against Burkina Faso. This is preparation for potential military action. This is violation of our sovereignty. I announced my response. Strong, clear, uncompromising. All 4 operatives will face trial for espionage. NATO personnel are banned from Burkina Faso territory. NATO military cooperation agreements are terminated. NATO intelligence sharing is suspended. Burkina Faso will not tolerate espionage disguised as partnership. Mali announced similar findings within hours. Mali has identified 2 NATO operatives conducting similar intelligence operations. Devices found. Data extracted. Evidence proves coordinated espionage across Sahel region. Niger followed. Niger captured 1 NATO operative with mapping device. Investigation ongoing. Preliminary evidence suggests systematic intelligence gathering. Chad reported. Chad has detained NATO-connected individual found in restricted military zone. Device recovered. Data being analyzed. Pattern emerging. NATO wasn't just spying on Burkina Faso. NATO was conducting systematic intelligence operations across entire Sahel region, mapping military infrastructure, recording capabilities, preparing for potential intervention. Within 48 hours, 7 African nations reported capturing NATO operatives or finding evidence of NATO intelligence operations. Within 1 week, 12 nations, continental pattern, systematic espionage, coordinated operation. Mali reported finding sophisticated surveillance equipment hidden in diplomatic vehicles, equipment designed to intercept military communications, devices capable of tracking troop movements, technology meant to map defense installations, same signature as device found in Burkina Faso, same manufacturer, same operational protocols, same intelligence operation. Niger discovered NATO operative posing as agricultural consultant who spent unusual amount of time near military bases, who photographed infrastructure with hidden cameras, who transmitted encrypted data to European servers. Operative using same cover protocols as captured agent in Ouagadougou. Same training, same methods, same mission. Chad intercepted communications between NATO intelligence officers discussing African security assessment operations. Communications revealing systematic intelligence gathering across Sahel region. Operations coordinated from Brussels. Missions approved at highest NATO levels. Continental espionage authorized and funded by alliance leadership. Guinea reported NATO operative attempting to recruit local military officers, offering money for information about defense capabilities, requesting details about troop strength and equipment, seeking intelligence about military planning and operations. Recruitment operation part of broader NATO intelligence campaign across West Africa. Senegal found surveillance devices installed near military communications center, devices transmitting real-time data about military activities, equipment recording frequencies used by armed forces, technology mapping entire military communications network, installation traced back to NATO-affiliated contractor operating under humanitarian cover. Ivory Coast discovered NATO intelligence officer embedded in United Nations peacekeeping mission. Officer using UN credentials to access restricted military areas, collecting intelligence under cover of peacekeeping duties, transmitting classified information about African military capabilities to NATO headquarters. UN mission compromised by NATO intelligence operation. Cameroon captured NATO operative conducting aerial surveillance using civilian drone. Drone equipped with military-grade reconnaissance equipment. Technology capable of detailed infrastructure mapping. Equipment designed for intelligence gathering, not civilian photography. Operative arrested while transmitting collected data to European intelligence services. Pattern was undeniable. NATO wasn't conducting isolated intelligence operation in Burkina Faso. NATO was running systematic espionage campaign across entire African continent. Coordinated operations, unified command structure, continental intelligence gathering, systematic sovereignty violation. NATO faced crisis. Not just one operative caught. Systematic espionage exposed. Continental intelligence operation revealed. Credibility destroyed. European media initially tried to downplay revelations. Called reports unsubstantiated allegations, described captured operatives as independent contractors, claimed surveillance equipment was commercially available technology, suggested African nations were overreacting to routine activities. But evidence kept mounting. More operatives captured, more devices seized, more communications intercepted, more operations exposed. Continental pattern impossible to deny. Systematic espionage impossible to dismiss. NATO intelligence campaign impossible to hide. French intelligence services tried to distance themselves from NATO operations. Claimed they had no knowledge of systematic intelligence gathering in Africa. Insisted French operatives were not involved in espionage activities. Suggested NATO was acting independently of French intelligence coordination. But intercepted communications told different story. Communications showing French intelligence coordinating with NATO on African operations. Messages discussing intelligence sharing between French services and NATO headquarters. Documents revealing French participation in planning systematic espionage campaign across former French colonies in Africa. British intelligence services remained silent. No comments, no denials, no explanations. Strategic silence suggesting knowledge of operations. Silence implying participation in intelligence gathering. Silence revealing complicity in systematic espionage. American intelligence officials offered vague statements about routine security assessments, claimed NATO was monitoring regional stability, suggested intelligence gathering was standard practice for international security organizations, refused to acknowledge systematic espionage or sovereignty violations, but African nations weren't accepting excuses, weren't tolerating dismissals, weren't allowing NATO to minimize systematic intelligence operations. Continental unity was forming. Collective response was building. Coordinated action was coming. NATO Secretary General forced to address situation. Press conference, Brussels, damage control. NATO acknowledges that intelligence gathering activities occurred in several African nations without proper authorization or coordination with host governments. This represents serious breach of NATO protocols and African sovereignty. We apologize for these operations and are conducting comprehensive review of our intelligence procedures. From denial to apology in 48 hours, from no knowledge to serious breach in 2 days, from claiming fabrication to admitting systematic espionage. Press conference was carefully staged. Secretary General read prepared statement. took limited questions, avoided specific details about operations, refused to identify responsible officials, declined to explain operational scope, minimized extent of intelligence gathering. How many operatives were conducting unauthorized intelligence operations? Reporter asked. We are still assessing the full scope of activities. Evasive answer. No numbers, no details, no transparency. Which NATO members authorized these operations? Another reporter pressed. Intelligence operations involve multiple alliance members. We are reviewing authorization procedures across all participating nations. Another evasive response. No accountability, no specifics, no responsibility assigned. Will any officials face consequences for authorizing systematic espionage in Africa? Third reporter demanded. We are conducting internal review. Appropriate actions will be taken based on review findings. Vague promise, no commitments, no timeline, no guarantees. But apology wasn't enough. Damage was done. Trust destroyed. Partnership questioned. Sovereignty violated. African Union called emergency session. Continental response required. Systematic espionage demanded collective action. Sovereignty violations needed unified response. I addressed African Union Assembly, presented evidence of NATO intelligence operations, showed captured devices, displayed intercepted communications, demonstrated systematic nature of espionage campaign. NATO has conducted systematic intelligence gathering across our continent. They have violated our sovereignty. They have spied on our military capabilities. They have mapped our infrastructure. They have prepared for potential intervention. This is not isolated incident. This is coordinated campaign. This is continental espionage. This is systematic violation of African sovereignty. We cannot accept apologies without accountability. We cannot tolerate espionage without consequences. We cannot allow foreign intelligence operations without response. We must act collectively. We must respond systematically. We must protect our sovereignty together. African Union voted unanimously to condemn NATO intelligence operations. Resolution passed without single dissenting vote. Continental unity demonstrated. Collective outrage expressed. Unified response authorized. But condemnation wasn't enough. Africa needed systematic response, continental counterintelligence capability, coordinated detection and prevention of foreign espionage operations, collective sovereignty protection. I announced African Intelligence Security Initiative, Continental Program, systematic detection of foreign espionage, coordinated response to intelligence operations, collective protection against unauthorized surveillance. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Chad are establishing African Intelligence Security Initiative. We will share information about foreign intelligence operations. We will coordinate detection efforts. We will jointly respond to espionage. We will collectively protect our sovereignty. Any African nation can join. Any country concerned about foreign intelligence operations. Any government wanting to protect military secrets. Any people demanding sovereignty protection. Join us. Share with us. Protect with us. Initiative offered comprehensive counterintelligence framework, intelligence sharing protocols, detection technology deployment, training programs for security personnel, coordinated response procedures, continental defense against foreign espionage. Within 1 month, 23 African nations joined initiative. Within months, 37 nations. Continental transformation, systematic counterintelligence, coordinated security, collective sovereignty protection. East African nations joined, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, concerned about foreign intelligence operations in their regions, wanting to protect military capabilities from unauthorized surveillance, seeking continental partnership for counterintelligence. Southern African nations joined, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, recognizing pattern of foreign espionage across entire continent, understanding need for collective response, committed to continental security cooperation. North African nations joined, Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, experiencing similar foreign intelligence operations, dealing with unauthorized surveillance activities, ready to coordinate counterintelligence efforts with continental partners. Central African nations joined, Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, Republic of Congo, facing foreign intelligence gathering in resource-rich regions, wanting to protect sovereignty and security. Eager to participate in Continental Counterintelligence Initiative, African Intelligence Security Initiative operated fully, intelligence sharing networks established, real-time communication between member nations about suspected foreign operatives, coordinated databases of known intelligence officers and surveillance equipment, Continental Early Warning System for espionage activities, detection technology deployed, advanced equipment for finding hidden surveillance devices, training for security personnel in counterintelligence techniques, protocols for inspecting diplomatic facilities and foreign contractors, systematic screening of international visitors and organizations, training programs launched, African counterintelligence officers receiving advanced instruction, learning latest detection methods and surveillance technology, studying foreign intelligence operational patterns, developing expertise in protecting national security against espionage, coordinated responses implemented. When one nation detected foreign intelligence operation, information immediately shared with all initiative members. Continental coordination prevented intelligence agencies from simply moving operations to different African countries. Collective response made systematic espionage across Africa increasingly difficult. NATO intelligence operations in Africa crippled, operatives identified and expelled, devices detected and seized, operations exposed and terminated, intelligence gathering capability destroyed. Within 6 months, initiative members identified and expelled 47 foreign intelligence operatives, seized over 200 surveillance devices, exposed dozens of intelligence gathering operations, prevented systematic espionage across member nations. NATO attempted to adapt, changed operational protocols, used different cover identities, employed new surveillance technologies, but African Intelligence Security Initiative was learning, evolving, improving detection capabilities, strengthening counterintelligence operations. Western intelligence agencies scrambled to adapt, new protocols developed, different methods tested, alternative approaches implemented, but African nations were watching, coordinating, detecting, responding. CIA attempted to continue intelligence gathering through commercial contractors, hired private security companies to conduct surveillance, used business consultants as intelligence collectors, employed humanitarian workers as information gatherers, but initiative members identified contractor patterns, recognized cover identities, detected surveillance activities, exposed intelligence operations. French intelligence services tried to maintain espionage through cultural organizations, used French language institutes as intelligence platforms, employed cultural exchange programs as cover for operatives, utilized educational partnerships for information gathering, but initiative trained personnel to recognize intelligence activities disguised as cultural programs, identified operatives operating under cultural cover, terminated intelligence operations masked as cultural cooperation. British intelligence attempted to conduct surveillance through development projects, embedded intelligence officers in aid organizations, used infrastructure development as cover for military facility mapping, employed agricultural programs as platform for intelligence gathering, but initiative members learned to scrutinize development projects for intelligence activities, identified suspicious personnel in aid organizations, prevented espionage disguised as development assistance. German intelligence services tried to gather information through technical assistance programs, used technology transfer initiatives as intelligence platforms, employed industrial partnerships as cover for capability assessment, utilized scientific cooperation for military intelligence gathering, but initiative developed protocols for protecting sensitive information during technical cooperation, identified intelligence collection attempts and technology programs, maintained security while engaging in legitimate international partnerships. The device hidden in that operative's boot changed everything, not just exposing one operation, revealing systematic espionage, proving NATO conducts unauthorized intelligence gathering, demonstrating violation of African sovereignty. That small device, no larger than mobile phone battery, contained terabytes of intelligence data, military facility locations, troop strength assessments, equipment capability evaluations, infrastructure vulnerability analyses, communications frequencies, defense protocols, strategic planning documents, years of intelligence gathering compressed into single device. Device also contained operational instructions, targets for intelligence collection, methods for gathering information, protocols for transmitting data, contact procedures for handlers. Entire intelligence operation documented in captured equipment. Most damaging were communications logs, messages between operative and NATO intelligence headquarters, instructions from European intelligence officers, reports on intelligence gathering progress, discussions of operational security, evidence of systematic, coordinated, authorized espionage campaign. I am Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso. NATO operative captured in my territory, device found in his boot, data extracted, espionage exposed, continental response triggered. I'm not the president who ignores foreign operatives, who tolerates intelligence operations, who accepts espionage as normal, who allows sovereignty violations. I'm the president who captures operatives, who exposes devices, who reveals espionage, who protects sovereignty. My security forces were trained for this. Counterintelligence operations, surveillance detection, operative identification, equipment seizure, intelligence extraction, continental coordination. When operative was captured, my teams knew exactly what to do. Systematic search, thorough inspection, technology-assisted detection, found device hidden in boot heel, extracted data, analyzed intelligence, shared findings with continental partners. My government moved quickly, expelled NATO diplomatic personnel involved in intelligence operations, closed facilities used for espionage activities, terminated contracts with organizations serving as intelligence covers, implemented new security protocols for foreign presence in Burkina Faso. My military adapted procedures, enhanced security at military facilities, improved communications encryption, strengthened counterintelligence capabilities, trained personnel in detecting and preventing foreign espionage, protected our defense capabilities from unauthorized intelligence gathering. The operative they sent, captured. The device they gave him, seized. The data they collected, exposed. The operation they ran, terminated. Operative now sits in Burkina Faso prison, facing espionage charges, awaiting trial, evidence overwhelming, conviction certain. Message clear to other foreign intelligence operatives considering operations in Burkina Faso. Device now sits in secure facility, being studied by African counterintelligence experts. Technology reverse engineered. Capabilities understood. Detection methods developed. Knowledge shared across initiative members. Data now distributed among initiative members. Intelligence about NATO espionage operations shared across continent. Operational patterns analyzed. Methods documented. Countermeasures developed. Continental defense strengthened. Operation now serves as case study, training material for African counterintelligence personnel, example of foreign espionage methods, demonstration of detection techniques, proof that African nations can successfully identify and terminate unauthorized intelligence operations. This is just the beginning, not the end, not the peak. The beginning of African nations detecting foreign intelligence operations, the beginning of continental counterintelligence, the beginning of systematic espionage exposure, the beginning of collective sovereignty protection, beginning of new era in African security, era of continental cooperation, era of collective defense, era of sovereignty protection, era of refusing to accept foreign intelligence operations as inevitable or normal. Beginning of African nations developing sophisticated counterintelligence capabilities, training expert personnel, deploying advanced detection technology, coordinating continental responses, building systematic defense against espionage. Beginning of foreign intelligence agencies learning they cannot operate in Africa with impunity, cannot conduct systematic espionage without detection, cannot violate sovereignty without consequences, cannot gather intelligence without African nations responding collectively and effectively. The beginning of foreign intelligence agencies learning they can't spy on Africa without consequences, can't conduct operations without detection, can't violate sovereignty without exposure, can't map our military infrastructure without response. They thought Africa was easy intelligence target, thought we lacked detection capability, thought we wouldn't coordinate responses, thought we'd tolerate espionage. They thought wrong. They underestimated African determination to protect sovereignty, underestimated our ability to develop counterintelligence capabilities, underestimated our willingness to coordinate continental responses, underestimated our commitment to collective security. They assumed African nations would remain passive targets of foreign intelligence operations. would accept espionage as normal part of international relations, would lack resources to detect sophisticated surveillance operations, would fail to coordinate effective responses to systematic intelligence gathering. They were wrong about all of it. Africa is our continent, our sovereignty, our security, our protection, and we defend it by detecting operatives, seizing devices, exposing operations, and building collective security. Our continent, with 54 nations, over 1 billion people, vast resources, strategic importance, and right to sovereignty, right to security, right to protection from foreign espionage, right to defend our territories from unauthorized intelligence operations. Our sovereignty that we fought for, that our ancestors died for, that previous generations sacrificed for, that we will not surrender to foreign intelligence agencies, that we will protect through continental cooperation and collective action. Our security that we build together, through African Intelligence Security Initiative, through intelligence sharing, through coordinated responses, through collective defense, through continental commitment to protecting all member nations from foreign espionage, our protection that we strengthen daily, training more counterintelligence personnel, deploying more detection technology, improving coordination protocols, developing more sophisticated capabilities, building more effective continental security system. NATO tried to spy on us. I caught them instead. And Africa is more secure for it. More secure because systematic espionage was exposed, because continental response was coordinated, because collective defense was established, because foreign intelligence agencies learned African nations will detect, expose, and terminate unauthorized operations. More secure because African Intelligence Security Initiative is operating, sharing intelligence, coordinating responses, protecting sovereignty, building continental counterintelligence capability that makes Africa increasingly difficult target for foreign espionage. More secure because African nations are united, working together, defending collectively, protecting each other, demonstrating that continental cooperation can successfully counter foreign intelligence operations. Africa is rising, not just economically, not just politically, but in security capabilities, in counterintelligence expertise, in continental coordination, in collective defense, in sovereignty protection. And world is learning that Africa is no longer easy intelligence target, learning that African nations can detect sophisticated espionage operations, learning that continental coordination creates effective defense against foreign intelligence gathering, learning that sovereignty violations will be exposed and terminated. World is watching African Intelligence Security Initiative operate, watching member nations coordinate responses to foreign intelligence operations, watching continental cooperation succeed where individual nations struggled alone, watching Africa build sophisticated counterintelligence capabilities that rival Western intelligence agencies. International intelligence community is reassessing Africa, reassessing capabilities, reassessing coordination, reassessing willingness to expose and terminate unauthorized operations, reassessing cost-benefit calculations of conducting espionage on African continent. Western intelligence agencies held emergency meetings, discussed implications of African Intelligence Security Initiative, analyzed continental counterintelligence capabilities, evaluated operational security failures, calculated losses from exposed operations and expelled operatives. CIA convened Africa Working Group, assessed impact of initiative on American intelligence gathering capabilities, reviewed operational failures across multiple African nations, discussed need for new approaches to intelligence collection in Africa, acknowledged that old methods no longer work against coordinated continental defense. MI6 conducted comprehensive review of African operations, identified operational security weaknesses that led to operative exposure, analyzed African detection capabilities and coordination protocols, concluded that systematic intelligence gathering in Africa now carries unacceptable risk of exposure and diplomatic consequences. French DGSE faced internal crisis, years of intelligence operations in former colonies suddenly compromised, networks of informants exposed, surveillance infrastructure detected and dismantled. Intelligence gathering capabilities in Africa severely degraded, decades of intelligence work destroyed by continental coordination. German BND suspended active intelligence operations in initiative member nations, assessed that risk of exposure outweighed intelligence value, decided to rely on open-source intelligence and commercial satellite imagery rather than risk operative deployment in hostile counterintelligence environment. But learning wasn't limited to intelligence agencies. Governments were learning, diplomats were learning, military planners were learning, international organizations were learning. European Union recognized that Africa demands different approach based on respect rather than exploitation, partnership rather than dominance, transparency rather than espionage, cooperation rather than intelligence gathering. United Nations acknowledged that African nations have sophisticated security capabilities that detect unauthorized intelligence operations, capabilities that expose operatives embedded in peacekeeping missions, capabilities that protect sovereignty against violations disguised as humanitarian operations. International media began covering African counterintelligence successes, stories about initiatives' effectiveness, reports on continental coordination, articles about African nations protecting sovereignty, coverage that changed global perception of African security capabilities. Academic institutions started studying African Intelligence Security Initiative, case studies of successful counterintelligence coordination, analysis of continental cooperation models, research on how developing nations can protect sovereignty against powerful intelligence agencies, publications recognizing African innovation in collective security. Other regions watched and learned. Latin American nations discussed creating similar continental counterintelligence initiatives. Asian countries studied African coordination protocols. Middle Eastern governments analyzed initiative success in detecting and terminating foreign espionage operations. This is new Africa. Africa that defends itself. Africa that protects its sovereignty. Africa that coordinates continental responses. Africa that builds collective security. Africa that refuses to accept foreign espionage as normal or inevitable. New Africa that doesn't wait for permission to protect sovereignty, doesn't apologize for detecting foreign intelligence operations, doesn't hesitate to expose espionage, doesn't tolerate violations of territorial integrity, doesn't accept that powerful nations have right to spy on weaker ones. New Africa that invests in counterintelligence capabilities, trains expert personnel in surveillance detection, deploys advanced technology for finding hidden devices, develops sophisticated protocols for identifying foreign operatives, builds continental networks for coordinating responses to espionage. New Africa that shares intelligence across borders, coordinates responses across regions, supports member nations facing foreign intelligence operations, builds collective defense stronger than any individual nation could create alone, demonstrates that continental cooperation can successfully counter Western intelligence agencies. Intelligence sharing happens in real time. When Senegalese security forces detect suspicious individual near military installation, information flows immediately to initiative headquarters in Ouagadougou. Within minutes, alert distributed to all 37 member nations. Within hours, multiple countries report similar suspicious activities. Pattern emerges. Coordinated intelligence operation identified. Continental response activated. Sharing extends beyond immediate threats. Member nations exchange information about known foreign operatives, share photographs and biometric data of expelled intelligence officers, distribute technical specifications of captured surveillance devices, provide details about intelligence gathering methods and operational patterns, comprehensive database accessible to all members. Database grows continuously. Each exposed operative adds to collective knowledge. Each seized device contributes technical intelligence. Each terminated operation provides operational insights. Each member nation benefits from experiences of all other members. Continental learning system that makes every nation smarter about intelligence threats. Coordination transforms individual national capabilities into continental power. When Burkina Faso faces intelligence operation, Mali provides technical assistance. When Niger detects surveillance device, Chad shares countermeasure expertise. When Guinea exposes operative network, Ivory Coast offers investigative support. Mutual assistance making each nation stronger through continental cooperation. Regional coordination centers established. West African Center in Dakar coordinating responses across region. East African Center in Nairobi managing intelligence sharing for Eastern nations. Southern African Center in Johannesburg coordinating counterintelligence operations in South. North African Center in Cairo handling intelligence coordination for Northern region. Central African Center in Kinshasa Managing responses in central region. Centers enable rapid regional response while maintaining continental coordination. Local intelligence shared regionally for immediate action. Regional patterns analyzed for continental distribution. Continental guidance provided for regional implementation. Multi-level coordination system, maximizing effectiveness while maintaining operational flexibility. Support extends beyond intelligence sharing. Member nations provide training assistance to countries developing counterintelligence capabilities, share detection equipment with nations lacking advanced technology, offer personnel support during major counterintelligence operations, provide financial assistance for building national security infrastructure, comprehensive support system strengthening continental defense. Collective defense proves more effective than individual national efforts. Before initiative, each nation faced intelligence threats alone, limited resources, isolated capabilities, vulnerable to sophisticated foreign operations, easy targets for Western intelligence agencies with superior technology and unlimited budgets. Initiative changes calculation. Foreign intelligence agencies no longer face individual nations. They face continental network of 37 countries sharing information and coordinating responses. They face collective capabilities exceeding any individual nation. They face unified defense, making intelligence operations exponentially more difficult and risky. Success demonstrates power of continental cooperation. NATO intelligence operations that operated successfully for decades suddenly exposed and terminated. CIA operatives who moved freely across Africa now identified and expelled. French intelligence networks that gathered information with impunity now dismantled. Western intelligence dominance broken by African coordination. New Africa that learns from each exposed operation, studies foreign intelligence methods, analyzes operational patterns, develops countermeasures for new surveillance technologies, continuously improves detection capabilities, evolves faster than foreign intelligence agencies can adapt. Every captured operative becomes learning opportunity. Interrogations reveal intelligence gathering methods. Questioning exposes operational procedures. Interviews identify recruitment techniques. Debriefings uncover communication protocols. Comprehensive intelligence extraction providing insights into foreign intelligence operations. Information analyzed systematically. Intelligence analysts studying patterns across multiple exposed operations. Researchers identifying common elements in foreign intelligence methods. Experts developing profiles of different intelligence agencies and their operational preferences. Comprehensive understanding of how foreign intelligence operates in Africa. Understanding translated into countermeasures. Detection methods developed for specific surveillance technologies. Screening procedures designed to identify particular types of operatives. Security protocols created to prevent specific intelligence gathering techniques. Targeted defenses more effective than generic security measures. Countermeasures shared across initiative. When Burkina Faso develops effective method for detecting particular surveillance device, method distributed to all members. When Mali creates successful protocol for identifying specific type of operative, protocol shared continentally. When Niger implements security measure preventing particular intelligence technique, measure adopted across Africa. Continental learning system multiplying effectiveness of individual innovations. Learning extends to emerging technologies. Initiative monitors developments in surveillance technology, tracks new intelligence gathering methods, analyzes evolving operational patterns, anticipates future threats. Proactive approach developing countermeasures before new technologies deployed against African nations. Research programs established, African engineers studying surveillance technology, African scientists developing detection methods, African analysts examining intelligence patterns, African experts building continental counterintelligence expertise. Indigenous research, reducing dependence on Western security knowledge. Evolution happens continuously, detection capabilities improving monthly, coordination protocols refined regularly, training programs updated constantly, technology advanced systematically, continuous improvement making initiative more effective over time. Evolution outpaces foreign adaptation. Western intelligence agencies slow to change, bureaucratic structures limiting innovation, established methods difficult to abandon, reluctance to admit African nations possess sophisticated capabilities, organizational inertia preventing rapid adaptation. Initiative moves faster, decentralized decision-making enabling quick responses, operational flexibility allowing rapid innovation, Motivation of defending sovereignty driving continuous improvement. Recent creation, meaning no legacy systems constraining evolution. Speed advantage over established Western intelligence agencies. New Africa that holds foreign intelligence agencies accountable, exposes operatives publicly, presents evidence of espionage to international community, demands consequences for sovereignty violations, refuses to quietly tolerate intelligence operations as inevitable cost of international relations. Public exposure destroys intelligence operations. Captured operatives identified in press conferences. Photographs distributed to international media. Evidence of espionage presented to journalists. Operational details revealed publicly. Transparency making future intelligence operations more difficult. Exposure serves multiple purposes. Warns other potential operatives about risks of conducting intelligence operations in Africa. Informs African public about foreign intelligence threats. Educates international community about sovereignty violations. Pressures foreign governments to cease espionage activities. Creates political costs for intelligence operations. Evidence presentation is comprehensive. Seized surveillance devices displayed publicly. Intercepted communications released to media. Operational documents published online. Technical analysis shared with international security experts. Overwhelming evidence leaving no doubt about intelligence operations and sovereignty violations. International forums used for accountability. African nations presenting evidence to United Nations. Raising espionage issues at African Union. Discussing sovereignty violations at regional organizations. Demanding international condemnation of intelligence operations. Using diplomatic channels to create consequences for espionage. Demands for consequences are specific. Calling for sanctions against nations conducting systematic espionage. Requesting international investigations of intelligence operations. Demanding compensation for sovereignty violations. Insisting on guarantees against future intelligence operations. Concrete demands rather than abstract protests. Refusal to tolerate espionage quietly represents fundamental shift. Previous generations of African leaders often knew about foreign intelligence operations but said nothing, feared diplomatic consequences of confrontation, worried about economic retaliation, concerned about military pressure, accepted espionage as unavoidable reality. Current generation refuses acceptance, willing to confront powerful nations, ready to face diplomatic pressure, prepared for economic consequences, determined to protect sovereignty regardless of costs. Fundamental commitment to independence and territorial integrity. New Africa that inspires other developing regions, demonstrates that continental coordination can protect sovereignty, proves that sophisticated counterintelligence doesn't require Western technology or expertise, shows that collective security can successfully counter foreign espionage, provides model for other regions facing similar intelligence threats. Latin American nations studying initiative closely, facing similar intelligence threats from American agencies, experiencing comparable sovereignty violations, seeking effective responses to foreign espionage, interested in replicating African success through regional coordination. Delegations visiting from Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Bolivia, meeting with initiative leadership, studying coordination protocols, examining detection methods, learning from African experience, planning regional counterintelligence cooperation modeled on African Intelligence Security Initiative, Asian countries analyzing African model, nations like Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines facing intelligence operations from multiple foreign powers, seeking ways to protect sovereignty without Western assistance, recognizing value of regional coordination, considering establishment of Asian counterintelligence cooperation framework, Middle Eastern governments examining initiative structure, countries experiencing intense foreign intelligence activity, wanting to reduce dependence on Western security assistance, interested in building indigenous counterintelligence capabilities, seeing African success as proof that regional cooperation can protect sovereignty, African experts traveling internationally, speaking at security conferences, presenting papers on counterintelligence coordination, sharing lessons learned from initiative operations, consulting with other regions on establishing similar frameworks, African knowledge becoming global resource for sovereignty protection. Model proves several critical points. Sophisticated counterintelligence doesn't require matching Western technology budgets. Effective coordination doesn't need Western organizational frameworks. Successful sovereignty protection doesn't demand Western expertise or guidance. Regional cooperation can successfully counter intelligence operations by more powerful nations. Inspiration extends beyond government officials, civil society organizations studying initiative, academic institutions analyzing coordination success, media outlets covering African counterintelligence achievements, international recognition of African innovation in collective security, recognition changing global perceptions, Africa no longer seen as passive victim of foreign intelligence operations, African nations recognized as sophisticated security actors, African coordination acknowledged as effective model for sovereignty protection, African capabilities respected by international security community, new Africa that changes power dynamics, makes intelligence gathering costly and risky for foreign agencies, forces Western nations to engage through diplomatic channels rather than espionage, demands respect rather than accepting exploitation, builds genuine partnerships based on mutual respect rather than intelligence dominance. Intelligence gathering costs increase dramatically. Operatives require more extensive training for African operations. Surveillance equipment needs more sophisticated concealment. Operations demand more complex security measures. Intelligence gathering requiring significantly more resources than before. Initiative. Risks multiplied substantially. High probability of operative capture. Significant chance of device detection. Substantial risk of operation exposure. Serious possibility of diplomatic consequences. Risk-benefit analysis of African intelligence operations fundamentally changed. Western intelligence agencies conducting fewer operations in Africa. Operations deemed too risky given detection capabilities. Missions canceled due to exposure probability. Resources redirected to easier targets. African success forcing foreign intelligence agencies to reduce activities. Western governments engaging differently with Africa. More diplomatic consultations, more transparent negotiations, more respectful partnerships, more genuine cooperation, shift from intelligence-based exploitation to diplomacy-based engagement, respect replacing condescension, African security capabilities acknowledged, African sovereignty valued, African partnership sought, African input requested, fundamental change in how Western nations interact with Africa, genuine partnerships emerging, partnerships based on mutual interest rather than intelligence dominance, cooperation founded on transparency rather than espionage, relationships built on respect rather than exploitation, engagement reflecting African capabilities and African agency, power dynamics shifting toward balance, Africa no longer passive intelligence target, African nations active security actors, African capabilities forcing respect, African coordination creating leverage, balance replacing previous Western dominance. New Africa that protects its military capabilities, secures defense infrastructure from foreign surveillance, encrypts communications against interception, guards strategic planning from intelligence gathering, maintains operational security against sophisticated espionage attempts. Military facilities secured comprehensively, perimeter security enhanced with detection technology, access controls strengthened with biometric systems, surveillance countermeasures deployed throughout installations, physical security preventing intelligence gathering attempts, communications encrypted at highest levels, military networks protected with indigenous encryption systems, command communications secured against interception, strategic planning discussions conducted through protected channels, information security preventing intelligence collection, strategic planning protected rigorously, planning sessions conducted in secured facilities, participants screened for security risks, documents controlled through strict protocols, information compartmentalized to limit exposure, comprehensive security preventing intelligence leaks, operational security maintained constantly, personnel trained in counterintelligence awareness, activities monitored for surveillance attempts, movements varied to prevent pattern analysis, communications secured to prevent interception, continuous security preventing intelligence gathering, new Africa that values sovereignty above international approval, willing to confront powerful nations over intelligence violations, ready to expose espionage despite diplomatic pressure, committed to protecting territorial integrity regardless of Western reactions, determined to defend independence earned through decades of struggle. Sovereignty is non-negotiable, not subject to diplomatic pressure, not compromised for economic benefits, not surrendered for international approval, not abandoned for Western acceptance. Absolute commitment to territorial integrity and national independence. Confrontation accepted when necessary, willing to face powerful nations over sovereignty violations, ready to endure diplomatic consequences, prepared for economic pressure. Determined to protect independence regardless of costs. Courage replacing previous accommodation. This is new Africa. Africa that defends itself. Africa that protects sovereignty. Africa that demands respect. Africa that builds collective security. Africa that controls its destiny. Africa that earns its independence daily through vigilance, coordination, and determination. New Africa that builds institutions for long-term security. African Intelligence Security Initiative isn't temporary response to immediate crisis. Initiative is permanent continental institution. Sustained investment in counterintelligence capabilities. Ongoing commitment to collective security. Enduring framework for protecting African sovereignty. New Africa that trains next generation of security professionals, young Africans learning counterintelligence techniques, students studying surveillance detection methods, officers mastering coordination protocols, personnel developing expertise that will protect continent for decades to come. New Africa that develops indigenous security technology. This is new Africa. Africa that defends itself. Africa that protects sovereignty. Africa that demands respect. Africa that builds collective security. Africa that controls its destiny. Africa that earns its independence daily through vigilance, coordination, and determination. New Africa that builds institutions for long-term security. African Intelligence Security Initiative isn't temporary response to immediate crisis. Initiative is permanent continental institution. Sustained investment in counterintelligence capabilities. Ongoing commitment to collective security. Enduring framework for protecting African sovereignty. New Africa that trains next generation of security professionals, young Africans learning counterintelligence techniques, students studying surveillance detection methods, officers mastering coordination protocols, personnel developing expertise that will protect continent for decades to come. New Africa that develops indigenous security technology, African engineers creating detection equipment, African programmers developing secure communication systems, African researchers advancing counterintelligence capabilities, African innovation reducing dependence on Western security technology. New Africa that writes its own security doctrine. Doctrine based on African experiences and African needs. Doctrine emphasizing continental cooperation over individual nation capabilities. Doctrine prioritizing sovereignty protection over international approval. Doctrine recognizing that collective security is foundation of genuine independence. This is Africa that caught NATO spying, exposed systematic intelligence operations, built continental counterintelligence initiative, and made continent more secure for all African nations. Africa that turned intelligence crisis into opportunity, used NATO espionage exposure to build something larger, transformed individual nation vulnerabilities into continental strength, created security framework that protects all member nations, built institution that will defend African sovereignty for generations. Africa that demonstrated intelligence agencies aren't invincible, showed that sophisticated espionage can be detected, proved that systematic intelligence operations can be exposed, illustrated that continental coordination can terminate foreign intelligence gathering, revealed that sovereignty can be protected through collective action. Africa that inspired continental unity, brought together nations across regions, united countries with different languages and histories, coordinated responses across diverse political systems, built cooperation that transcends individual national interests, created solidarity based on shared commitment to sovereignty protection. Africa that changed international security landscape, forced intelligence agencies to reconsider African operations, made espionage on continent increasingly difficult and risky, demonstrated that developing regions can build effective counterintelligence capabilities, proved that continental cooperation can successfully counter Western intelligence dominance. Africa that protected future generations, ensured that African children will grow up in nations that control their own security, guaranteed that African military capabilities will remain protected from foreign surveillance, secured African sovereignty for decades to come, built foundation for genuine independence and self-determination. Africa that honored ancestors who fought for independence, ancestors who sacrificed for sovereignty, Ancestors who died for freedom. Ancestors who dreamed of Africa controlling its own destiny. Ancestors whose vision is being realized through continental cooperation and collective security. Africa that fulfilled promise of independence. Independence isn't just political autonomy. Independence is security autonomy. Independence is protecting sovereignty from all threats, including intelligence operations. Independence is building capabilities to defend territorial integrity. Independence is refusing to accept foreign espionage as normal. Africa that proved skeptics wrong. Skeptics who said African nations couldn't coordinate effectively. Skeptics who claimed Africa lacked resources for sophisticated counterintelligence. Skeptics who insisted continental cooperation would fail. Skeptics who believed Africa would always be vulnerable to Western intelligence operations. Africa that continues to strengthen. Initiative adding new capabilities. Member nations improving detection technology. Personnel gaining more experience. Coordination becoming more sophisticated. Continental security growing stronger every day. Africa that sends clear message to world. Message that sovereignty will be protected. Message that espionage will be exposed. Message that intelligence operations will be terminated. Message that Africa demands respect. Message that continental cooperation creates effective defense. Message that new Africa has arrived. I am Ibrahim Traoré. I caught NATO spying on my nation. I exposed their systematic intelligence operations. I helped build continental response. I watched Africa become more secure. And I know this is just beginning. Beginning of Africa controlling its own security. Beginning of continental cooperation protecting sovereignty. Beginning of African nations refusing to accept foreign espionage. Beginning of new era where Africa defends itself effectively and collectively. Beginning of Africa writing its own security narrative. For too long, Western nations wrote our security story, decided what threats we faced, determined what capabilities we needed, defined what sovereignty meant for African nations, controlled narrative about African security and African capabilities. No more. Africa now writes its own story. Story of nations detecting sophisticated espionage. Story of continental coordination, defeating foreign intelligence operations. Story of collective security protecting sovereignty. Story of African innovation creating effective counterintelligence capabilities. Beginning of Africa trusting African solutions. For decades, we were told African problems required Western solutions. African security required Western military presence. African intelligence required Western technology. African defense required Western expertise and Western guidance. But African Intelligence Security Initiative proves otherwise. African nations solved African security problem. African coordination created African defense system. African expertise developed African counterintelligence capabilities. African innovation built African protection against foreign espionage. Beginning of Africa investing in African institutions. Initiative isn't dependent on Western funding, isn't controlled by Western organizations, isn't designed by Western security experts. Initiative is African-owned, African-operated, African-controlled institution serving African interests and protecting African sovereignty. Member nations contribute resources, share technology, provide personnel, fund operations, build capabilities, investment in continental security, investment in collective defense, investment in African future free from foreign intelligence operations, beginning of Africa training African experts, young Burkinabe learning counterintelligence techniques, Malian officers mastering surveillance detection, Nigerian analysts studying intelligence patterns, Kenyan technicians developing detection equipment, continental expertise growing, African capabilities expanding, self-sufficiency increasing, training centers established across continent, facilities in Ouagadougou teaching counterintelligence fundamentals, programs in Bamako focusing on surveillance detection, courses in Niamey covering coordination protocols, institutes in N'Djamena specializing in technology development, continental education system for security professionals, graduates returning to home nations, applying learned skills, training others, building national capabilities, strengthening continental network, creating multiplier effect where each trained professional creates more trained professionals, exponential growth in African counterintelligence expertise, beginning of Africa developing African technology, engineers in Burkina Faso designing detection equipment, Programmers in Ghana creating secure communications systems. Researchers in South Africa advancing surveillance countermeasures. Scientists in Egypt developing indigenous security technology. Technology adapted to African conditions. Equipment functioning in Sahel heat. Systems operating with limited infrastructure. Devices working in remote locations. Technology designed for African environment by African engineers solving African challenges. Technology reducing dependence on Western security equipment. Equipment that might contain backdoors for Western intelligence agencies. Systems that might transmit data to foreign servers. Devices that might compromise African security while claiming to protect it. Indigenous technology eliminates these risks. Beginning of Africa building African networks. Communication systems connecting initiative members. Real-time information sharing across continent. Coordinated databases of intelligence threats. Continental early warning systems for espionage activities. Networks strengthening collective security. Networks that Western intelligence agencies cannot penetrate. Encrypted communications they cannot intercept. Databases they cannot access. Systems they cannot compromise. African-controlled networks protecting African security information from foreign intelligence gathering. Networks enabling rapid response. When Mali detects suspicious operative, information immediately shared with all members. When Niger finds surveillance device, specifications distributed across continent. When Chad intercepts intelligence communications, content analyzed collectively. Continental coordination operating at speed of modern communications. Beginning of Africa, establishing African protocols. Procedures for identifying foreign operatives. Methods for detecting surveillance equipment. Techniques for exposing intelligence operations. Protocols developed through African experience, refined through African practice, proven through African success. Protocols shared across initiative. Standard operating procedures for counterintelligence operations. Common training curricula for security personnel. Unified response frameworks for espionage detection. Continental standardization enabling effective coordination and mutual support. Protocols constantly evolving. Learning from each exposed operation. Adapting to new intelligence methods. Developing countermeasures for emerging surveillance technologies. Continuous improvement based on operational experience and shared knowledge. The operative in the boot? Just one thread. Pull that thread, an entire fabric of NATO intelligence operations unraveled. One captured operative exposed continental espionage. One seized device revealed systematic intelligence gathering. One terminated operation triggered continental transformation. That single operative represented decades of NATO intelligence operations in Africa. Operations conducted with impunity, espionage performed without consequences, surveillance executed without detection, intelligence gathering assumed to be unstoppable and inevitable. One capture changed everything, proved NATO operatives could be caught, demonstrated surveillance devices could be found, showed intelligence operations could be exposed, revealed that African nations could detect and terminate foreign espionage. That single device contained evidence of systematic intelligence campaign, evidence that destroyed NATO's credibility, evidence that exposed continental espionage, evidence that proved sovereignty violations, evidence that triggered unified African response. Device revealed operational patterns, showed how NATO conducted intelligence gathering, demonstrated coordination between alliance members, exposed involvement of multiple intelligence agencies, provided blueprint for detecting similar operations across continent. Device enabled continental response, evidence shared with African nations, intelligence distributed across initiative members, operational patterns analyzed collectively, countermeasures developed cooperatively. Single device became foundation for continental counterintelligence system. That single terminated operation triggered transformation, operation that exposed systematic espionage, operation that revealed NATO's disrespect for African sovereignty, operation that demonstrated need for continental coordination, operation that catalyzed creation of African Intelligence Security Initiative, transformation that continues today, initiative growing stronger, capabilities expanding, coordination improving, continental security increasing, transformation that will protect African sovereignty for generations, transformation that changed power dynamics. NATO can no longer spy on Africa with impunity. Western intelligence agencies can no longer conduct operations without risk of exposure. Foreign nations can no longer violate African sovereignty without consequences. Power balance shifting toward African control of African security. Transformation that inspired other regions. Latin American nations studying initiative model, Asian countries analyzing African coordination success, Middle Eastern governments examining continental counterintelligence framework, African innovation becoming global model for sovereignty protection. Transformation that proved African capability, capability to detect sophisticated espionage, capability to coordinate continental responses, capability to build effective security institutions, capability to protect sovereignty against powerful intelligence agencies, capability that skeptics said Africa lacked. Africa is our continent. We defend it. We protect it. We secure it. Together. Our continent with rich history, history of ancient kingdoms and sophisticated civilizations, history of resistance against colonialism, history of struggle for independence, history of fighting for sovereignty, history that continues today through counterintelligence operations and continental coordination. Our continent with bright future, future of economic development free from foreign exploitation, future of political autonomy based on genuine sovereignty, future of security independence protected by African capabilities, future of continental cooperation creating collective strength, future that initiative helps secure. Our continent with shared destiny, destiny linking all African nations, destiny requiring continental cooperation, destiny demanding collective security, destiny protected through unified action against foreign intelligence operations, destiny that initiative helps fulfill. We defend it through vigilance, constant monitoring for foreign intelligence operations, continuous surveillance of suspicious activities, persistent screening of international visitors and organizations, unceasing protection of military facilities and communications, vigilance that never relaxes because threats never disappear. We defend it through coordination, information sharing across borders, joint responses to intelligence threats, mutual support during espionage crises, collective action against sovereignty violations, coordination that makes continental defense greater than sum of individual national capabilities. We defend it through innovation, developing new detection methods, creating advanced surveillance countermeasures, building sophisticated counterintelligence systems, designing indigenous security technology, innovation that keeps African capabilities ahead of foreign intelligence methods. We protect it through institutions, African Intelligence Security Initiative as permanent continental organization, training centers educating security professionals, research facilities developing new capabilities, coordination networks enabling rapid response, institutions that will protect African sovereignty long after current leaders are gone. We protect it through investment, resources dedicated to counterintelligence capabilities, funding allocated to detection technology, personnel assigned to coordination operations, money spent on training programs, investment in African security by African nations for African benefit. We protect it through expertise, trained professionals detecting foreign operatives, skilled technicians finding surveillance devices, expert analysts identifying intelligence patterns, knowledgeable officers coordinating continental responses, expertise that grows stronger with each exposed operation and each terminated espionage campaign. We secure it through unity, 54 nations with shared commitment to sovereignty protection, diverse countries with common purpose of defending territorial integrity, different systems with unified goal of preventing foreign intelligence operations, unity that transcends individual national interests for continental security. We secure it through determination, determination to expose every foreign operative, determination to find every surveillance device, determination to terminate every intelligence operation, determination to protect every member nation, determination that never wavers regardless of diplomatic pressure or international criticism. We secure it through vision, vision of Africa controlling its own security, vision of continental cooperation protecting sovereignty, vision of African nations refusing foreign espionage, vision of genuine independence based on security autonomy, vision that initiative makes reality. Together we are stronger. Stronger than any individual nation facing intelligence threats alone. Stronger than Western intelligence agencies expected. Stronger than skeptics believed possible. Stronger than foreign operatives anticipated. Stronger because coordination multiplies capabilities and unity creates power. Together we are vigilant, 37 nations watching for intelligence operations, thousands of trained professionals detecting foreign espionage, continental networks sharing information instantly, collective early warning system protecting all members, vigilance that covers entire continent with overlapping security coverage. Together we are effective, dozens of operatives exposed and expelled, hundreds of devices detected and seized, multiple intelligence operations terminated, continental espionage campaign defeated, effectiveness proven through operational success and measurable results. Together we are independent, independent from Western security assistance, independent from foreign intelligence cooperation, independent from external security guarantees, independent through African capabilities protecting African sovereignty, independence that initiative makes possible and sustainable. Together, we defend Africa, we protect Africa, we secure Africa, we build Africa's future, we honor Africa's past, we fulfill Africa's promise, we realize Africa's potential, we ensure Africa's sovereignty, we guarantee Africa's security, we create Africa's destiny, and we do it together, as one continent, as united nations, as collective force, as coordinated defense, as shared commitment, as common purpose, as continental family, as African unity. This is our continent. This is our sovereignty. This is our security. This is our future. This is our achievement. This is our success. This is our Africa. And nobody spies on our Africa without consequences, without detection, without exposure, without termination, without continental response, without African unity defending African sovereignty.